The majority of people who would have heard this parable were Palestinian peasants living on 700 calories a day and not always sure where the next 700 calories was going to come from. Life was hard scrabble. The biblical stories made other promises, like that story from Elijah of the widow who was rescued. That would have been a pretty typical story, not the rescue part. Most of Jesus' audience would have gone to bed hungry. And already another kind of myth had developed within the community of Israel, and that is that if you are doing well, if you are not going to bed hungry, it is because God has provided for you. But you really had to ask the question, what about the 98% whom God did not provide for? Because that would have been about the ratio of those who had and those who had not. 2%, 98%. Does that mean that God is present with those who have and absent from those who do not have? Well, when you look down through history, we have had a tendency to look at the poor as those whom God abandoned for some reason. It was probably a really good reason. They're probably bad or lazy or both. And there's still a little bit of that worldview floating around in our culture, wouldn't you say? And so this parable messes with us, doesn't it? Wow. How are we to know if God is present? Well, some of us think there ought to be signs. And we can all point to them, can't we? Maybe there are. For you and for me. But what if at the end of the day, the jar of meal, the pantry, is empty? So the good news for the hungry peasant, for the 98%, Jesus affirms, is that the kingdom of the Father is in their midst. It may be a kingdom without signs and wonders. It may, in fact, be a kingdom of absence and loss. But it was a way of talking to people whose lives were perceived as absence and loss about the God who was nevertheless very present. So let me conclude by saying that Jesus looked at the world around him, where, like I said, 2% had all the power and most of the land, which was power and food, and the 98% just tried to make it to the age of 30. And he asked himself, what does the tradition of the God of Abraham and the God of Moses have to do with this community? Because those traditions and stories talk about rescue, and there's no rescue on the horizon in these parts. The injustice would have been palpable daily, and any attempt to pick up the sword and to change it, well, would have been fruitless. And so, drawing on the best from the rabbinic tradition, he used parables to help his community reimagine their world so as to relocate their lives within the mystery that we call God and not the kingdom of Caesar. So, I've got some questions for you to think about during this time for contemplation. Can you think of a time in your life when all of the signs of a loving creator, mystery, spirit disappeared? Here's another question. Is your commitment to a vision of a generous God based on having a full pantry and a comfortable bank account? And finally, what does the empty jar mean for your understanding of the mystery that we call God? Or is it just messing with you?